medications, and they were getting a really strange high off of it. There we go. There we go. Manufacturers have mixed the drug with naloxone, the opioid antagonist, to reduce its use as an opioid accelerant. They were actually using it as an opioid accelerant, and of course sometimes they were overdosing due to that fact. This drug is rarely used now to get high. It really doesn't work very well, especially now that they've mixed the drug with naloxone. Propoxyphene is also called Darvon, Darvocet, Percocet, and Wyjezek. Wyjezek, what a stupid name. It is used for mild moderate pain relief. This drug metabolizes slowly and so can lead to overdose or addiction if not monitored. The problem is that it builds up in your system and because it metabolizes so slowly. So you have to be very careful with it. The drug is sometimes used as a replacement opioid for heroin treatment in place of methadone because it metabolizes so slowly. Only about 4% of the overdose deaths using opioids have been seen with propoxyphene. So it's not really that dangerous because it metabolizes so slowly. Fentanyl, this is what I was looking for last time. Fentanyl is the most powerful of the opioids as it is 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine. If you go in for surgery, then one of the things that they will give you, they'll start off with a bolus of morphine and fentanyl, and that should knock you out. That's the way it works. Of course, it doesn't work on me. Morphine doesn't work at all. Fentanyl will knock me out. That's what they have to knock me out with. But they have to give me a double shot of it, enough to kill a rhinoceros. That's what they keep telling me anyway. Who's killing rhinoceri, right? Yeah, how do they know how to kill a rhinoceros? Fentanyl is used as a pre and post surgery to alleviate excessive pain. It comes in a lollipop. It comes in a patch. Tom Petty, if you remember Tom Petty, they were talking about the 3 types of fentanyl that he was using. 2 of them were patches. He had 2 patches on him when he overdosed, and 2 of them were fentanyl. Actually, he had 3 patches. One of them was a benzodiazepine patch. There's also an oral transmucosal tablet called Actic, which is meant to be dissolved in the mouth. Street chemists have been able to replicate the structure of fentanyl with a powerful drug called China White. So if you ever hear of anybody using China White, this is 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine. This is some really, really powerful stuff, and you have to be really careful about this. China White, we try to keep that off the streets, mainly because so many people overdose on it, because it's so strong. Unfortunately, some of the street drug contains MPTP, which kills the dopamine-producing cells in the brain, resulting in Parkinson's disease. At best, the best thing you can hope for is Parkinson's disease. At worst, it paralyzes you for the rest of your life, and you become frozen. China White, something good to stay away from. Something easy to overdose on. LAAM is a long-acting opioid that is used for heroin replacement therapy. We don't use it in the United States, but it's used overseas, especially in Europe. LAAM lasts for 2 to 3 days, whereas methadone only lasts for 1 to 2 days. So if you're on methadone treatment, you go in on Friday and they will send you home with methadone so that you can take another dose on Sunday. You'll have to give yourself a dose of methadone. But if you use LAAM, of course, it works right through the weekend. So you can go in on Friday and get your shot of LAAM, and then you can go back on Monday and get a shot of LAAM again. So they can keep you regulated. Okay. LAAM metabolizes in the system too slowly for the drug to be used for pain management. It really doesn't work for pain management. The only thing that we can use it for is to treat you for heroin addiction. LAAM is more tightly controlled than methadone, and despite its success in treating heroin addicts, the paperwork involved makes it an unattractive alternative than the more widely used methadone treatment. So we don't really use this in the United States. There are very few places that actually use the LAAM. They usually mostly use methadone. Naloxone and naltrexone are opioid antagonists blocking all the exogenous and endogenous opioids. These drugs can be given to people who have overdosed on opioids, blocking the deadly effects of the opioid structure. Unfortunately, of course, naloxone is short-acting and has to be frequently administered to block the deadly effects of the opioid chemical. So we have first responders wandering around, and they've got shots of naloxone and naltrexone. You would think that they'd want to give them naltrexone, but the problem is, of course, it's too expensive. So they will carry around naloxone, which is a lot less expensive. They'll give them a shot of the naloxone, and then they'll try to get them to the emergency room so that they can start their treatment. Naltrexone blocks the effects of opioid for up to 72 hours to help prevent relapse. And of course, that's one of the reasons why naltrexone is the drug of choice, but it's too expensive. It used to cost about $30 a shot. Then a guy bought the pharmaceutical company that makes naltrexone, and he raised it to $120 a shot. Now, how can you do that? Why would he do that? Why would that be legal?
Cost money.
Money. You remember the guy that, what was that drug that he had? Anyway, he raised it like 1.5, 1,500 times what it was for this drug. It was an anti-malarial drug or something. Just for the money, and because he could. And of course, they took him to court. And eventually he got thrown in jail for fraud, for something else. He got thrown in jail for something else. I've got to take a drink. I'm sorry. I can't pronounce that without a drink. Buprenorphine is a powerful opioid agonist at low doses, but at high doses it becomes an opioid antagonist. This is weird. So if you take it, and you take a small amount of it, you get a buzz. And if you take a little bit more, you probably still get a buzz. But if you take too much of it, it actually works against itself, and all of a sudden your buzz goes away. Okay, so if you take too much of this stuff, it doesn't work. At low doses, it is used as an analgesic substitute for morphine. It's about 50 times stronger than morphine, or than heroin. Now, it's only logical that the more of this stuff that you take, the better your buzz is going to be. I mean, that's only logical, right? Unfortunately, that's not the way it works with this stuff. At high doses, it has an inverse agonistic effect and will block opioids from receptor sites for up to 30 hours. So if you take too much of it, you just blocked yourself from ever having it for having a good time for 30 hours. At high doses, it can be used as part of an opioid treatment regimen because it blocks the effect of the opioids while taking it, the edge off of some of the side effects. And that's what they use it for. Catapres, or Clonidine. Clonidine is often used to diminish nausea, anxiety, and diarrhea from opioid withdrawal symptoms. It also reduces opioid craving. It reduces the overactivity of the norepinephrine receptors and can cut withdrawal time in half. It's used in conjunction with naltrexone. Clonidine can reduce withdrawal recovery from 1 month to 5 days. Tramadol and Sedatives. These two new synthetic opioids were developed as less abusable or as addictive analgesics. These drugs are still abused and have been classified as Schedule IV drugs. If you want to, you can make just about anything addictive. Any drug that relaxes and soothes the body and the mind are known as sedatives. If it eases anxiety or reduces sleep, it's known as a hypnotic. So sedative hypnotics are ones that are used as sedatives, and they're ones that put you to sleep. The two main categories of sedative hypnotics are benzodiazepines and barbiturates. Benzodiazepine examples would be Klonopin and Xanax, and for barbiturates it would be the barbitals, phenobarbital, secobarbital, and all the rest of them. Just under half of all prescriptions for psychiatric medications are written for antidepressants. The first sedatives were bromides, also used as anticonvulsants in the 1850s. The biggest problem with these drugs was the fact that they had a long half-life, so toxic levels could build up in your body, and of course that's what happened. Women were taking it as an elixir, If they used it too often, if they were such a nervous person, that potentially they would build up a toxic level in their bodies, and then they would have a reaction to it. Around the American Civil War, chloral hydrate started being used as a sleep aid and a sedative. We'll talk about chloral hydrate when we talk about alcohol. Chloral hydrate was used to treat tension, pain, insomnia caused by alcoholism, and neuroses caused by pregnancies. It was used as the original Mickey Finn to knock out men so that they could Shanghai them and throw them on boats. It knocked them out. It knocked them out for about 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours, and then they could tie them up and they could put them on the boat, and by the time the boat took off or left port, then the guy would wake up, and of course now he's out in the middle of the sea and he has to work. So they would Shanghai him. In 1882, physicians began using formaldehyde to control alcohol withdrawal symptoms. It's an aldehyde, and because it's an aldehyde, you know what it tastes like. Have you guys ever smelled or formaldehyde? Have you ever smelled it? No? Okay. It's really, really strong. Okay. It's got a really interesting flavor. Odor. If you can smell it, you can taste it, damn it. And boy, that's the problem. It is still sometimes used to treat alcohol withdrawal symptoms despite the addictive properties and the unpleasant odor. Of course, it smells like formaldehyde. So it smells like you're drinking something that will pickle your innards. Barbiturates were first developed at the end of the 19th century, and their popularity peaked in the 1930s and 1940s. Barbiturates are any compound synthesized from barbituric acid. Pentobarbital, secobarbital, and phenobarbital are good examples. That's all a different number of molecules that we're dealing with. Pento has 7, I think. Seco has 2. These substances are highly addictive and fairly toxic, making them fairly dangerous, and for that reason we try to stay away from barbiturates. Milltown or moprabamate was used fairly extensively as a sedative into the late 1940s and into the 1950s. It became popular with housewives and came to be known as Mother's Little Helper. So if you've ever heard that song by the Rolling Stones, this is really what they're talking about. They're talking about Milltown. This stuff is highly addictive. It wasn't as addictive as the barbiturates that people were taking before, but it gained a lot of popularity in the 1960s. And then the benzodiazepines were developed, and then we changed our sedative from Milltown to Prozac. Doradin was also used as a barbiturate substitute. Unfortunately, it was weaker than phenobarbital. It was just as addictive as barbiturates. It is no longer manufactured in the United States. Librium. I talk about Librium and Valium all the time. That's what we used to give to the soldiers' wives during Vietnam to keep them from writing nasty letters to their husbands. And I know that sounds horrible, but what are you going to do? You don't want the soldiers to start crying in the middle of a foxhole. Is that what you want? So we have to give them this stuff to keep them from writing those horrible letters. And we would give it to them by the bucket load. I told you, we get all of our pills in gallon jars. Everything was in a gallon jar. And you pour onto the plate, and you would count out the number of pills that we give everybody. But Valium and Librium came in 5-gallon buckets. 5-gallon buckets, exactly. And they were heavy. Oh man, were they heavy. Librium was the first benzodiazepine developed in 1954. Along with diazepam, these two drugs dominated the sedative hypnotic market until the invention of Prozac. Thought to be a good alternative to the highly addictive barbiturates, benzodiazepines proved to be very addictive themselves, with just as dangerous withdrawals as barbiturates, and we found that out later in the 1960s and into the 1970s. Did that keep us from giving it to the soldiers' wives? No, of course not. Hell no. We were trying to take care of the immediate problem. We didn't care about the future possible problems. We were just trying to solve that problem. Today there are several new drugs that are being advertised as less addictive. Lunesta, Buspar, Rosarim, Ambien, of course, Lyrica. You see these advertisements on television from time to time. Only Buspar and Rosarim have been proven to be less addictive. So if you're taking a sleeping pill, Lunesta, Ambien, or Lyrica, then potentially you're going to get addicted to it. Sedative hypnotics proved to be so addictive that their use waxed and waned over the years. At this point in time, benzodiazepines are used sparingly, and they have been replaced by psychiatric medications that are less addictive, and there is a lower possibility of adding them to other medications to get a high. One of the things we see on television a lot, if you watch these advertisements, they're trying to get you to talk to your doctor and get your doctor to give you another drug. You're supposed to add this drug to this drug, and it'll take care of your depression that isn't being taken care of with Prozac. But what they're talking about are benzodiazepines, and these are really kind of dangerous. Sedative hypnotics can still be abused if the drug is overused when prescribed by the physician. It is used in combination with other psychoactive substances for the synergistic effect or counteractive effect. The drugs are borrowed or stolen from someone as a form of self-medication. The drugs are obtained by other illegal means, for example, forged prescriptions or buying on the black market. Now I'm going to talk about some of the people that have died because of overdoses. And every time somebody dies, I tell you, oh, if they stayed away from that drug, they would have been okay. The list of celebrities who have died from barbiturate overdoses is quite long. Marilyn Monroe had high doses of Nimbutal and chloral hydrate in her system when she died. She committed suicide. Marilyn Monroe. One of the most beautiful women in the world, Dorothy Dandridge, if you've ever actually seen her in a movie. She had high levels of tricyclic antidepressant imipramine, also known as Tofranil, when she was found dead. She committed suicide as well. Jimi Hendrix was a notorious mixer of drugs. Hendrix had high levels of secobarbital in his system when he asphyxiated on his own vomit. The drugs were prescribed to his girlfriend and not actually to him. But she's the one that shot him up. Bruce Lee, the quintessential martial arts expert, died from an allergic reaction to a painkiller containing aspirin and meprobamate. You remember meprobamate was Miltown. It was that sedative that women were using, Mama's Little Helper. This is Freddie Prinze. You guys have never heard of this guy before. He shot himself while under the influence of Quaaludes. He was the star of the hit sitcom Chico and the Man. And of course, none of you have ever seen Chico and the Man, so he really... But his son is an actor now, Freddie Prinze Jr. I guess he's quit acting recently. Elvis Presley.
Who's that?
I know, yeah, who's Elvis? Elvis was a notorious prescription pill mixer. When he died, he had 14 different drugs in his system, including codeine, Quaaludes, and methaqualone. God, what a dummy. What a dummy. But he's not the dumbest one. They get dumber. Keith Moon was the drummer for The Who and an alcoholic when he tried to clean up. The drug he was using was a sedative clomethazole. He had 10 times the daily dosage. That wasn't the problem. Well, remember, they were giving him this drug so that he could get off of alcohol. Guess what he took the drug with? Alcohol. Of course he did. Of course he did. Oh, man. Abbie Hoffman was a 60s anti-war activist. Hoffman was found with 150 tabs of phenobarbital in his stomach. They, of course, ruled his death a suicide. Steve Clark was the head lead guitarist for Def Leppard. Clark was found by his girlfriend with respiratory failure from the use of painkillers, Valium, antidepressants, and once again, alcohol. You mix alcohol with barbiturates and you get a synergistic effect, and now you're dead. Margaret Hemingway was an actress and granddaughter of the iconic author Ernest Hemingway. She was granddaughter Hemingway was found dead from an overdose of phenobarbital on the 35th anniversary of her grandfather's suicide. That's the way to celebrate. Commit suicide too. This is Rob Pilatus of Milli Vanilli. He was Milli do you remember Milli Vanilli? Okay. He was Milli of Milli Vanilli. Actually, they were pretty good dancers. And they had those big boots on and they stomped around. He died of a heart attack induced by sedative given to him to help with alcohol withdrawals. Of course, he took the drug with alcohol, which was probably a huge mistake. Dana Plato was the actress from the sitcom Different Strokes. Actually, all three of the people all the three of the kids off that show are a mess, or were a mess, and she's dead. But the other two are a mess as well. She died from a mixture of Soma, which is a muscle relaxant, and Vicodin. She had a long history of prescription drug abuse. This is Old Dirty Bastard, the lightning rod of the rapper band Wu-Tang Clan, which, well, I remember Wu-Tang Clan. Okay. He died after mixing Tramadol, which is a painkiller, with cocaine. Not the smartest thing in the world to do. This is Chris Penn. You may remember him from select movies. He was in Dirty Dancing. Yeah, he was in Dirty Dancing. He was the foil to whatever the guy's name was. Anyway, Chris Penn was an actor and brother of Sean Penn. He died after a mixture of promethazine, which is an antihistamine, and codeine. The combination with the obesity, created a fatal enlargement of his heart. R&B singer Gerald Levert died from a combination of Percocet, Vicodin, Darvocet, Xanax, and 2 antihistamines. This is a Playboy bunny. Anna Nicole Smith, she was a blousy blonde. She was huge. She was a very large lady. She was a Playboy bunny, and she married a man that was in his 80s and in a wheelchair. Why she did it? Well, she must have done it for the money, because he was a billionaire. She died with 11 drugs in her system: Ativan, Cirax, Clonopin, Chloral Hydrate, Lexapro, Valium, Noctec, and Zoloft in her system. What she would do, she would take a drug and she would start to have a reaction to it, and she would think, oh, this is too hard, so this is too bad, so I'm going to take something that tempers it. And so she kept taking all of these things, trying to give herself a special high, and as it turned out, she took in a toxic level of drugs. Posthumous Academy Award winner Heath Ledger died with 6 drugs in his system: oxycodone, hydrocodone, Xanax, Valium, doxalamine, and temazepam in his system. I just saw him this weekend in a movie. He was a good actor. I kind of liked him. Michael Jackson had a number of drugs in his system when he died, but the combination that killed him were propofol, lorazepam, midazolam, and Valium in his system. And of course, now he's gone. Officially, Corey Haim died of pneumonia, but the actor had been fighting drug addiction most of his adult life. He was found unresponsive with lethal doses of Valium, Vicodin, Soma, and haloperidol. He had lethal doses of each one of these. He had enough drugs in his system to kill himself 4 times. I know. Was it suicide or was it not? Or had he built up that much of a tolerance? This is Amy Winehouse. She was a notorious drug experimenter who went through rehab several times before her death at age 27. She had started several episodes of binge drinking and then abstaining before her death. What she would do is she would go cold turkey, and she would not drink for 2 or 3 weeks. She would dry out a little bit, and then when she started binge drinking again, it gave her a better high. When she died, she had a blood alcohol level of 0.416. 5 is usually deadly. In her case, of course, since she was an alcoholic, this shouldn't have killed her. But because she had been doing that waxing and waning thing, that process of cleaning up and then binge drinking again, it killed her at 27. Whitney Houston had been a notorious drug mixer most of her adult life. If you read anything from her family, they'll say that it was Bobby Brown's fault, that he got her onto drugs. But the reality is she'd been on drugs all of her life, even before Bobby Brown. She was found drowned in her bathtub with high levels of cocaine, Flexeril, Benadryl, Xanax, and marijuana in her system. Judy Garland. Had been a child star and had started a pattern of excessive work days fueled by uppers and downers. She took uppers in the morning to be able to work, and in order to go to sleep at night, she would take downers. And she had this roller coaster way of taking all of these drugs. She died at 47 of a secabarbital overdose. Philip Seymour Hoffman was a highly touted actor nominated for 4 Academy Awards, of which he won once. He died at 46 from an overdose of heroin, cocaine, amphetamines, and benzodiazepines. People think that he just died of a heroin overdose. The reality was he had all 4 of those drugs in his system, and that's what killed him. Tom Petty was a rocker for 4 decades. He died at 66 with 3 forms of fentanyl in his system, along with oxycodone and 3 types of benzodiazepines. That's a lot of drugs. Kurt Cobain was the iconic frontman for the alternative rock band Nirvana. Kurt Cobain died of a shotgun blast, but he had excessive amounts of heroin and Valium in his system when he died at 27. Jim Morrison was the lead singer for the San Francisco band The Doors. Morrison considered himself a poet and a philosopher as well as a singer. He died of a heroin overdose in his bathtub at age 27. Is there any good news yet? Wait a minute. Let me see if I've got some. Nope, not yet. Janis Joplin was a rock star from the late 60s and early 70s. She partied with such iconic figures as the Grateful Dead and Country Joe and the Fish. She actually lived with Country Joe McDonald. If you've never heard, it's not important. She died at 27 of a heroin overdose. She was a notorious Southern Comfort whiskey alcoholic. Prince was a singer and songwriter from the 1980s until his death in 2016. His album Purple Rain was one of the most celebrated albums of the last 50 years, along with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. He died of a fentanyl overdose at age 57. He had actually died twice. He died on an airplane flying from Houston to Minneapolis. They landed in Moline, Illinois, and he was dead on the plane. And they took him back to the hospital and revived him. 2 days later, he died of a fentanyl overdose in his elevator. And they found him the next morning in his elevator. John Belushi was one of the major original players on Saturday Night Live. He played Joliet Jake Blues of the Blues Brothers. In 1982, Belushi overdosed on a speedball at 33. Speedball is either morphine or heroin and mixed with cocaine. What a wonderful mixture that is. Anyway, and this stuff will kill you, and it did. It certainly killed him. But he's not the only one. River Phoenix, you may remember this guy. He was a child actor from the late 80s and was headed for success. He was in Stand By Me. He was young Indiana Jones in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. He was in Sneakers, which was a really good movie. He died of a speedball overdose outside a club in Los Angeles at 23. This kid took the speedball, went outside, was standing beside a parking meter, and collapsed, and everybody came outside to watch him die. And that's what happened. Nobody called 911. It was the dumbest thing in the world. And they all had a good time watching River Phoenix expire. And River Phoenix is outside dying, and everybody came out and watched him die. When somebody finally called 911 and the paramedics finally got there, they couldn't get to him because everybody was standing around. The traffic was blocked for blocks because all these people were standing in the road to watch River Phoenix die. A lot of people watched him die. Chris Farley was a comedian of Saturday Night Live fame. He starred in such movies as Tommy Boy and Beverly Hills Ninja, 2 of the greatest movies ever. No, I'm just kidding. He died of a speedball overdose at 33 like his hero John Belushi. He died at 33. Belushi died at 33. Margaret Hemingway committed suicide on the 35th anniversary of her grandfather's suicide. I know. Actors and actresses, aren't they goofy? At present, benzodiazepines are the most widely used sedative hypnotics in the United States. Benzodiazepines vary in their half-lives, and they can cause tissue dependence. For this reason, they can be highly addictive with severe withdrawal symptoms. Most physicians only use benzodiazepines as short-term fixes for specific conditions. So we try to stay away from them because they're so addictive. In order of usage, the most widely prescribed benzodiazepines are Xanax, 34 million prescriptions. Of course, that's an anxiolytic. Ativan, which is also an anxiolytic, 19 million prescriptions. Clonopin, 16.7 million prescriptions. Clonopin's really strong. This stuff is really strong. It's an anxiolytic. It's an anti-anxiety drug. Valium or diazepam, 12 million prescriptions, and Restoril, 7.6 million prescriptions. So if we look at it, Xanax is used almost twice as often as any of the other.
Sorry, my phone's going nuts over here.
Your phone is?
It keeps coming on. I'm trying to turn it off. I don't know what.
Is it a friend of yours?
Took a bunch of the different sedatives.
Take it, put it in the restroom. Oh, I'm just kidding. Benzodiazepines are used to reduce symptoms of anxiety and panic disorders. It's used to reduce anxiety and apprehension in surgical patients. It's used to treat sleeping problems. If you go in for surgery, they will give you a shot of Valium before they take you to surgery. And it never works on me, but it works on other people, I guess. It's used to treat sleeping problems, to control skeletal muscle spasms, to control seizures, and to dampen acute alcohol withdrawal symptoms. Benzodiazepine, the side effects of benzodiazepine usage is very similar to alcohol. Benzodiazepines are most often abused in conjunction with other drugs, as they are used to lessen the effects of the withdrawal symptoms. People that are addicted to methamphetamines may use benzodiazepines, cocaine or heroin. They'll use benzodiazepines to take the edge off. In one study, 100% of benzodiazepine addicts were addicted to other substances as well. The typical benzodiazepine abuser is a white, well-educated, 30-year-old female. Benzodiazepines. It's easy for them to get Valium. It's really easy for them to get Valium. Benzodiazepines work because they increase the effects of the inhibiting neurotransmitter GABA in the cerebellum, the cerebral cortex, and the limbic system. The stronger the influence of GABA inhibits anxiety-producing thoughts and overstimulation of neural messages. Benzodiazepines are metabolized by the liver to produce more powerful metabolites. The original drug and the metabolites tend to stay in the body for an extended period of time because they are extremely fat soluble, and this is one of the problems. This is also the problem with marijuana. It stays in your system for an extended length of time because it's so fat soluble. It's extremely fat soluble. So these things stay in your system for a long time, as does marijuana, or the THC in marijuana. So since they stay in your system for an extended length of time, it's easy to overdose on this stuff. So if you use this stuff every day, you're going to be building up a level in your system, and potentially. Yesterday I used 3 tabs, and today I'm going to use 3 tabs again. Well, yesterday the 3 tabs didn't do that much to me, but today it's going to overdose me and it's going to kill me because it's building up in your system. So you have to be really careful with this stuff. Alprazolam or Xanax is used for generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and depression. Halcyon is used for short-term treatment of insomnia, 7 to 10 days. Diazepam Valium is used for anxiety, skeletal muscle spasms, control of seizures. IV Valium is used as a sedative before surgery, and they usually will give you a shot of Valium before you go into surgery. Really? Tolerance has to do with liver efficiency. Older individuals will have a stronger reaction than a younger person will because their livers, because they're older, their livers are not as efficient. Overdose of benzodiazepines can cause dementia-like symptoms in the elderly, and this is kind of a sad thing. We see this from time to time. Individuals that seem to be suffering from dementia, actually it's just benzodiazepine poisoning. Tissue dependence can occur with excessive use over several months or normal dosage over a year. Because of the drug's lipophilic properties, lipo means fat and philic means love of fat. In other words, they're extremely fat soluble. Even small doses over time can cause tissue dependence and addiction. So that's one of the reasons why we try to stay away from benzodiazepines. Withdrawal from benzodiazepines can be severe and take several months to taper off from the drug. Symptoms include recurrence of original symptoms, magnification of symptoms, exaggeration of the recurrence of symptoms, true withdrawal caused by low GABA and excess epinephrine and norepinephrine. My wife takes Effexor. Effexor is a mixture of antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs. The reason she takes it is because she's gone through menopause. You see a lot of individuals, when they start going through menopause, they will almost automatically give them Effexor, and that's what happened. In 2003, I went on a trip to South America. It was a Fulbright trip, and it was a 6-week trip. So I was gone for 6 weeks, and during that time, my wife had a panic attack. And when she went in to talk to the doctor, this is in 2003. How old was she in 2003? She was in her early 50s. And when she went in to talk to the doctor decided to put her on Effexor, like they did with almost all women that had gone through menopause. And she was okay as long as she took her Effexor. But if she didn't take her Effexor, she got sick. She got nauseous. It made her violently ill. So she decided to wean herself off of this stuff. And what she did, she would open up, Effexor comes as a capsule. And she would open up the capsule and she would dump out all the granules and she would count them. And every day she extracted one more granule until she was hardly taking any at all. And that's how she got off it. But it took her like, I don't know, 100 days because there's 100 granules in it. So every day, every morning she had to open up the capsule and count all of the granules and subtract one more granule. As odd as that seems. And the surprising thing was that every capsule had exactly the same number of granules in it. So when I say that it may take months to taper off, that's exactly what happens. It took her about 3.5 months to get off of Effexor. Well, the odd thing is that she had another panic attack and they put her back on Effexor again. So despite the fact that she'd gone off of this stuff, they put her back on. Onset of withdrawal begins after 1 day with short-acting benzodiazepines and lasts from 7 to 20 days. For long-acting benzodiazepines, withdrawal begins after 5 days and takes up to 28 days for the symptoms to subside. Rohypnol. Do you guys know what rohypnol is? Roofies? Ah, roofies. Do you guys know what it's used for? It's a date rape drug. Rohypnol is a benzodiazepine that causes short-term memory loss and sedation. The drug has been used for short-term memory impairment and has been used as a date rape drug since the 1970s. Rohypnol has been banned in the United States along with GHB since 1996, but that doesn't keep it from coming into the United States and being used as a date rape drug. If you give this stuff, what happens is guys will go to the bar and they'll drop this stuff into somebody's drink. And then the person passes out. And then they take them out to their car, take them home, do whatever they want with them, and then they take them back and put them back into their car. And they have no memory, no memory whatsoever. They don't remember what happened. All they know is that something happened because now they've got all kinds of interesting problems. They're rubbed raw or whatever. Or they have bite marks on them or something strange has happened to them. But they have no clue what happened to themselves. It lasts for a number of hours. And for this reason, of course, it's illegal in the United States. It was this drug that Bill Cosby was accused of using. And ketamine. He also used ketamine. But rohypnol was one of the drugs that he was accused of using. Buspirone or Buspar is commonly prescribed as an anxiolytic and in combination with an SSRI to treat depression. Buspar does not increase GABA. This drug does not seem to cause addiction and is rarely abused. This drug cannot be used to treat seizures, and that is Buspar. Lunesta is a hypnotic drug prescribed for insomnia. The drug increases GABA production, leading to relaxation. This substance is only addictive when taken with another drug. And that's the problem. They tell you not to take this stuff, don't drink alcohol while taking Lunesta. Actually, that's on the television advertisement. They tell you not to drink alcohol while taking Lunesta. If you're taking anything else that potentially is addictive, then the Lunesta becomes addictive as well. Placidil and chloral hydrate. Placidil is actually a chemical ether. Chloral hydrate is actually 3 molecules of ethyl alcohol fused together. Okay, so let's pretend that you're drinking tequila. You're taking in 1 molecule of ethyl alcohol. Chloral hydrate is 3 of those molecules fused together. So chloral hydrate is like super alcohol, and you'll have 3 times the effect of alcohol. Both of these drugs are prescribed to induce sleep and have a long history of addictive use and toxic overdose, and that's usually the problem with chloral hydrate. Who had chloral hydrate in their system? Marilyn Monroe, when she died. Who was the other one? Anna Nicole Smith had chloral hydrate in her system. It's like taking shots of 3 shots of tequila in 1 glass. That's what chloral hydrate is. As odd as that seems. GHB is a rapid sleep inducer. GHB increases the body's level of growth hormone, HGH. Its effects are sedation, disinhibition, empathy, sensory enhancement, and euphoria. Its effects last for 3 to 6 hours. The difference between GHB and Rohypnol as a date rape drug is that Rohypnol knocks you out, and GHB actually allows this individual to be awake. So this individual has the ability to react to whatever's happening to
So
them.
they're alert, but they're not.
They don't
likely
remember
not
anything.
to-
They can't remember.
Yes, you can consider-
And they can't fight the person off.
They're voluntarily, I guess. It
Exactly.
seems like they're voluntarily.
Exactly. You understand completely.
Okay.
Okay. Isn't this amazing? It takes away your inhibitions as well. So things that you would normally do, you will do under GHB.
Me and my Law and Order episode, so.
There you go. There you go. And it lasts longer than the Rohypnol as well. GBL and BD, these drugs are metabolized into GHB in your system. These 2 substances have been formulated into mint-flavored rave elixirs. Are you getting a load of this stuff? Blue Nitro, Revivrant, Gamma G, Rimforce, and Ensom X. That's GBL and BD. This isn't something that we see in the United States. We don't really rave in the United States. It's not that popular in the United States. Very popular over in Europe. So the individuals are taking this stuff. They're waking up the next morning in the middle of an orgy or whatever. I mean, it's really kind of interesting. It's a rave drug, and while they're listening to the music, they have that reaction, but you get them away from the music, and all of a sudden they have another reaction. Quaaludes or Mandrax. Quaaludes effects are similar to those caused by alcohol and linger for 60 to 90 minutes. The sedating effect lasts for 6 to 10 hours. This is a drug that is often abused in South Africa. It was real popular during the Carter administration, Quaaludes. So in the just after the Vietnam War, Quaaludes became very, very popular. Men were taking this stuff, and it took away their inhibitions as well. So they were doing things like flirting with somebody that they normally wouldn't flirt with, dancing when they wouldn't dance. You know, it's kind of like alcohol, but it was Quaaludes, and this is Of course, it's a benzodiazepine, so it's dangerous. And sometimes these guys were overdosing. Lyrica, this drug is used to treat nerve pain from the shingles or diabetes and can be part of seizure treatment. More recently has been used for the treatment of anxiety, sleep, and mood disorders. This substance is rarely abused alone. Usually, just like all of these sleep drugs, if you mix it with something else, then all of a sudden you're addicted to this drug as well. Resarim activates melatonin receptors in the brain. Melatonin is a substance that helps maintain your circadian rhythm. It's used for short-term treatment only. When taken with alcohol, the result can be toxic. The Z drugs, there's 3 of them. They're called the Z hypnotics. These drugs are short-acting drugs with 1 to 4 hour half-lives. Excess use causes nausea, headaches, diarrhea, and drowsiness. These drugs are rarely abused except with other drugs. They are hypnotics, so they put you to sleep. And that is their purpose. And that is the end of chapter 4.
Getting sleepy talking about sleeping pills.
I knew they're all sleeping pills, of course. Yeah, it's really dangerous to take sleeping pills. You need to do anything else to put yourself to sleep. If you can't sleep, taking sleeping pills should be the very last resort. Because getting addicted to this stuff, and it's not the fact that you're addicted to it, it's the fact that you can't sleep without this stuff. Now all of a sudden you can't go to sleep. Yeah, exactly. Now we got a problem. Chloral Hydrate. 3 molecules of alcohol fused together. My God. Who does that?
That's just too much.
Okay. I got no good news for you. I'm going to attack alcohol. I apologize. If you guys have relatives that drink, I apologize. But it ain't good stuff. It's just not good stuff.
That's what I hate. That's not my favorite thing.
No. The majority of the people worldwide drink alcoholic beverages. There's close to 8 billion people in the world, and the majority of people in the world drink alcohol. This doesn't include Islamic countries where it is not allowed by the Quranic law. So any place, Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim country, Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, you don't drink alcohol there. You're not supposed to anyway. They don't. They're not supposed to. Iran. China's alcohol consumption has doubled since they started making a lot of money. India's alcohol consumption has increased by 50%, so we see a lot more drunk Indians. 23% of English boys and 27% of English girls 15 to 16 were drunk 3 times or more in the past month. This is 15 and 16-year-olds. Wait a minute, what class is that? Sophomores?
And where's this at?
England.
It depends.
Okay, well, 16-year-olds, that's a sophomore year.
Freshman, sophomore?
Freshman, sophomore year.
For me, when I was 16, I was a junior.
You were a junior? Oh, okay. Well, you're a special case. And you're also not English, so you don't count. 23% of English boys, 27% of English girls. The English girls drink more than the English boys. And these are freshmen and sophomores. Why would they do that? I don't know. In the past month, 3 times in the past month, Russian men consume the equivalent of 6 to 7 bottles of vodka per capita per year.
Oh my God.
6 to 7 bottles of vodka. 75,000 alcoholics are homeless in Japan out of a total of 100,000 homeless people. Most of the people that are homeless in Japan are alcoholics. The Japanese it's a very controlled society. And when you have somebody that goes against the social norm, it's very rare. And they're not treated very well, as you can imagine. Around the world, more than 2 million people died due to alcohol. What did I read? 115 people die of heroin overdose every day. I read that today. I was trying to figure out how many people are dying from this horrible heroin problem, or not heroin, but opioid. So it's not just heroin, of course. 115 people every day in the United States. Around the world, more than 2 million people died due to alcohol every year. Approximately 10% of all diseases and injuries around the world were a direct result of alcohol abuse. This is an individual that was burned in a car crash with a drunk. Last month, at least 126 million Americans, 52% of all Americans 12 and older, had at least one beer, one glass of wine, or one cocktail. 16 million of this group are considered heavy drinkers. She, of course, is drinking 2 beers. So she's got 2 months' worth every week. How strange is that? More than 2/3 of the 11 million American college students at 4-year colleges had one drink, and more than 2/3 of those drinkers had 5 or more drinks on at least one occasion in the past year. College kids are the most notorious drinkers in the United States. So if you go any place other than Diné College, where this is a dry campus, if you go to ASU, you go to NAU, you go to the dorms, you're going to run into this stuff. You go to the fraternities, don't go to the fraternities.
Especially fraternities.
Especially fraternities, you are correct. That's what it's all about. About 6.2% of 8th grade students, 18.5% of 10th grade students, and 30% of 12th grade students have been drunk in the United States. Them are kids. Where in the world are they getting their beer? How can they possibly get drunk? It's illegal for them to have that stuff.
Unless they're hanging around with the older kids.
Yeah, of course. And they're trying to get them drunk so they can have sex with them. Or whatever. Yesterday, about $250 million was spent at bars, restaurants, and liquor stores for alcoholic beverages in the United States. Every day. $250 million. That's a lot of money.
You could buy me a car with that and a house.
You could buy the state of Arizona for $250 million. Yesterday, 7,500 brides and grooms were toasted with champagne in the United States. Every day, 7,500 people are married in the United States. 25 to 30% of all hospital admissions in the United States were due to direct or indirect medical complications from alcohol. And as somebody who has worked in the emergency room, there's nothing more irritating than getting somebody who has come in for an automobile accident. We have 3 bodies over here, and we have this drunk guy who actually wrecked his car into those 3 people and killed them. And now I've got to treat this guy. The thing about drinking alcohol, sometimes it doesn't lay on your stomach very well. As long as you're standing up, you're okay. You lay these people down, all of a sudden they want to vomit. And guess where they aim it? If you talk to them, they're aiming it towards your voice. Projectile vomiting toward you. I've gone home with vomit on my pants legs and vomit on my shoes. So much, and it's so irritating. It's never somebody with the flu, okay? It's always somebody that's drunk. Somebody with the flu, if they hear you talking, they'll aim their vomit in another direction. But drunk people, it's like they're aiming at you. You think I'm kidding? Maybe it's just in Omaha, in Oklahoma.
No, I think I believe you. My brother is a EMT.
Ask him about drunks and vomit. About half of the murder victims and half of the murderers in the United States were drinking alcohol at the time of the crime. This is not an actual picture of the murder. More than half of the rapes that occurred in the United States involved alcohol. About half of the American adults have a close family member who has or has had alcoholism. Half of the people in the United States. The best drinkers in the world, white people. White people are professionals. They've been doing it forever. I keep telling you guys this. They're really good at it. In the United States, 2,700,000 crime victims reported that the offender had been drinking alcohol prior to committing the crime. Alcohol. Every year, alcohol abuse and addiction costs businesses, the judicial system, medical facilities, and the United States more than $184 billion, or more than $638 for every man, woman, and child. I don't know how you feel about paying that $638 so that somebody else can be drunk, but it kind of bothers me a little bit since I don't drink and haven't had a drink since 1976. Alcohol may be as old as civilized man. Evidence of fermented beverages have been found in China that are at least 9,000 years old. A beer recipe has been found in ancient Mesopotamia that dates back 7,400 years. So we've been drinking alcohol for an extended length of time. In China, in Mesopotamia, in the Western world, in the Eastern world. The only place that alcohol doesn't seem to have taken a toehold is in the Americas. They had alcohol in the African peninsula, or in the African continent, in Europe, in Asia, in Australia. But the Americas are the only place that didn't seem to drink alcohol. Alcohol has been used as a reward for pyramid builders, as food for grain-enriched beer, and of course this is what they used to drink in England. Mead, if you understand what mead is, it's fermented alcohol. It's an alcoholic beverage mixed with grain. That's what mead is. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I've never tried it or seen it or smelled it, but that's what it is. As a cure-all, laudanum was used, was alcohol mixed with opium, and they used it to treat alcoholism as well as other things. As a sacrament in both the Jewish and the Christian religions, water substitute with the contaminated water supply in Europe, everybody had to drink alcohol. If you tried to drink water, you died from dysentery because all the water was contaminated. As a social lubricant, whenever and wherever it's used, as a tranquilizer for whoever uses it, and as a source of taxes, it is especially heavily taxed in the United States and in Europe. So when we were in the military and living in Germany, one of the things that the Germans wanted us to do was to give them alcohol for Christmas. They were perfectly happy with a fifth of whiskey. They were perfectly happy with any alcohol we would give them. Mainly because as military members, we didn't have to pay taxes on the alcohol we bought. So we had cheap alcohol, we also had cheap tobacco, but we hardly ever did tobacco away. But you would go to the Class 6 store and you would buy a bottle of booze for your landlord. They'd be happy because they paid such high taxes on their alcohol, it was just too expensive for them to buy. So they were looking forward to Christmas so that you would give them a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of vodka or Jägermeister or something. The Germans. Throughout history, alcohol has been banned for its negative effects on its user. 2,650 years ago, alcohol was banned in China. 2,500 years ago, alcohol was banned by select Buddhist sects. The ban continues to this day. This is one of the reasons why Buddhists very rarely drink alcohol. It's very rare to find a Buddhist that will drink alcohol. The gin epidemic found 20 million gallons of gin being manufactured per year, and this is primarily in England. The death toll was enormous. It was controlled by heavy taxing in 1751, which reduced consumption. Prohibition in the United States with the 18th Amendment was ratified by 46 of the 48 states by 1920. Iowa was the 29th state to ratify the amendment. Of course, Arizona was a state in 1920. Yeah, it was a state in 1920. Okay. It was repealed by the 21st Amendment in 1933, so it was intact for 13 years. But every state almost all the states in the Union ratified the prohibition, 46 out of 48. And that's what made it an amendment to the Constitution. Alcohol prohibition or even control have often run into a stone wall. Attempts in sub-Saharan Africa to control beer consumption has been impossible because of the fairly nutritious homebrew beer that provides a modicum of grain. And for that reason, they drink the alcohol. The Pilgrims loved their grog. You don't think of pilgrims, those people with the black outfits and the funny hats and the belt buckles and whatnot. You don't think of them as boozers, but they did. They drank a lot of alcohol. This idea followed through to the Revolution as alcohol sales and taxation provided needed revenue to finance the war. So the way that we financed the war was through taxation of alcohol. Hot dog. Tempers began in the United States in 1840, but wasn't successful until 80 years later when we passed prohibition. Alcohol continues to provide revenue for governments in the United States. The federal government taxes alcohol manufacturers $13.50 for each 180 proof gallon. $13.50. The states average a little less than half that much at $6.50. So if you want to buy a gallon of whiskey, it's going to cost you almost It's going to cost you $20 worth of taxes in order to buy that gallon of whiskey. So it's going to cost you $25. It costs you $5 for the whiskey and $20 in taxes. Beer and wine are taxed differently. About a nickel a drink goes to the federal government for beer. Wine is taxed by alcoholic content. 14% or less is taxed at 21 cents per fifth. 14 to 21% is taxed at 31 cents per fifth. 21 to 24% is taxed at 62 cents per fifth. Naturally sparkling wine is taxed at 67 cents per fifth, and artificially carbonated wine is taxed at 65 cents per fifth. Okay. Taxes, money, very important. There are hundreds of different alcohols ranging from deadly poisonous to barely toxic. The alcohol that people drink is ethyl alcohol, grain alcohol, ethanol, or ETOH. I call it ETOH because this is what we called it in the laboratory. That's the symbol for alcohol, ETOH. Okay.
And the chemistry, isn't that the chemical name?
Yeah, that's what they call it in chemistry. So when you have ethyl alcohol, the E stands for ethyl. OH is oxygen and hydrogen. So that's the structure of the molecule. The next most common alcohol is methyl alcohol, wood alcohol, or methanol. This stuff is poisonous. Isopropyl alcohol, or isopropanol, is a solvent used in medicine. Butyl alcohol or butanol is used in industrial processes. So you can drink this stuff, but you can't drink this stuff, you can't drink this stuff, and you can't drink this stuff. It's poison. Any beverage with over 2% alcohol is called an alcoholic beverage. All alcoholic beverages contain ethanol, but may acquire the other alcohols in the production process. So they've got other poisonous alcohols in there as well. Additions due to production are called congeners, which add distinctive tastes, aromas, and colors to the beverage. Congeners may be acids, aldehydes, esters, ketones, phenols, or tannins. I was watching Good Morning Vietnam with Robin Williams. He's a DJ, and he goes to Vietnam, he goes to the bar, and they give him the beer of Vietnam. Well, of course, the beer of Vietnam had formaldehyde in it. And the reason they put formaldehyde in it was to give it a better flavor. Okay? So the alcohol tasted so bad. Their beer tasted so bad, they had to put formaldehyde in it to make it taste good. And of course he drinks it, and the first time he drinks it, he spits it back out because it tastes like, he can taste the formaldehyde in there. As funny as that is, or not funny as that is. And that's the aldehydes that we're talking about here. He gives it a different flavor. Anyway, they would put formaldehyde in it. Some beverages add a number of congeners. Whiskey and brandy have the most, while beer and vodka, of course, have the least. The more congener in the beverage, the more severe the hangover. And this is one of the reasons why if you drink whiskey or you drink any of the whiskeys, it tends to give you a really bad hangover. The more additives that are in there, these are the things that actually give you the hangover, this stuff right here. So if it's just pure alcohol, the probability, Everclear, have you ever heard of Everclear? No? Okay, one guy that's heard of Everclear. Thanks, Edison, I appreciate that. Okay. Everclear is pure alcohol. And we used to use it, of course you use it as to mix things with in the hospital, in the pharmacy. So we'd go down and get Everclear. And of course, it was very highly regulated, and you couldn't really drink it because you had to account for every drop of this stuff. Anyway, but it's pure alcohol. So the more congener there are in the drink, the more likely that you'll have a hangover. Methyl alcohol is fairly toxic and has a curious affinity for the optic nerve. During Prohibition in the United States, some bootleg manufacturers mistakenly added methanol to their beverages to increase the alcoholic content. The result was often blindness or, in extreme cases, death. It actually killed them. This is methanol, and it has an affinity for the optic nerve. So, you know that rubbing alcohol you see whole bottles of this stuff. I mean, if you take a couple swigs of that stuff, potentially if you do this too frequently, you're going to make yourself blind. Alcohol comes in three categories: beer, wine, and distilled spirits. Beer is produced when grain ferments, and of course almost all beer is made out of barley. Sometimes it's made out of wheat. I'm trying to think of a beer that's made out of wheat. Not Carrot Top. Is it Carrot Top? Blue Moon. Blue Moon is wheat. It's wheat beer. Okay. Wine is produced when fruits ferment, grapes, plums, or peaches. You can make wine. Most wine is made out of grapes. Distilled spirits are made from fermented grains. Whiskey, 40 to 50%. Tubers or vodkas, 75%. Schnapps, Palinka. Palinka is a drink from Hungary, 40 to 50%. Or vegetables. Absinthe is made from a wood bark. Tequila and mezcal are made from the mezcal agave plant, the agave cactus plant. And rum is made out of, what is rum made? Oh, sugar. Rum's made out of sugar. It can be made from other fermented beverages. Wine, you can take wine and distill it, and you get the brandy. That's what brandy is. It's distilled wine. Okay, so you've got three different types. You've got wine, you've got distilled spirits, and you've got beer. Okay. Beer, the first indication of beer consumption comes from 10,000 years ago, a long time ago. Beer is made from grains, usually barley, but sometimes wheat, which have been allowed to sprout and then crushed and fermented with hops and yeast. Ale is about 5 to 6% of all beers are ales. Stout is another type of beer. Porter is another type of beer. Malt liquor. In the United States, we don't have that much malt liquor. Colt 45 is a malt liquor. Mickey's is a malt liquor, and Old English 800 is a malt liquor. About 6.9% of all the beers are malt liquors. Lagers, that is Budweiser beer. It's 3.2 to 5% alcohol. This stuff is 6 to 9% alcohol. Ale is 5 to 6% alcohol. Then we have Bock beers: Hudipol, Schänling, Michelob, Amber, Bock. These are all Bock beers. So there's a lot of different flavors, a lot of different tastes, a lot of different strengths of alcohol out there.
It's like going into a fireworks factory. A fireworks store. We're only a different.
You're talking about fireworks? Are we reading beer to fireworks?
It's just like going into
Yeah.
a place that you like, and then you see all these different types of all beverages.
And you have no idea what else is out there. If you drink beer, you drink one type of beer, and that's all you drink, and you don't realize that there are also Bock's, malt liquors, porters, stouts, and ales. Okay. Yeah, almost all the beer in the United States is lager beer. And there are no more American brewers. All the brewers in the United States are owned by outside countries. Budweiser's owned by a Belgian beer company. Yeah. Miller's owned by a Canadian company. What's the Canadian company? Anyway, we need to stop right here. We'll pick this up next time. I know this is all fascinating. It is especially fascinating for me.